Thank you all for coming. This is the second year that we've done medieval love and sex at BSU. We're really super excited. I will give the floor over to Dr. Larry Swain, our advisor, and he'll tell you a little bit about us.
Well, Presidente. So those of you who don't know, the Medieval Club meets Mondays this semester at 10 over in the Viking Room. I am the erstwhile faculty advisor, and I dispense loads of advice for free. If you want good advice, though, it costs. All right, our first presenter today is Miss Casey Fisher, one of our graduate students, first-year GA, who thinks she loves etymology.
I don't think, I know.
And all things folklorish. She has a BFA from here, and a BA from here, and is the Medieval Club's secretary. She wishes what? Corporate holidays would focus more on dirty words than profits. That's a very good sentiment. A for the day. A for the day kind of sentiment.
So, as Dr. Swain's lovely introduction said, I like etymology. So, I am doing medieval words of love. Or, what to say when you want to go a-courting. So,
like Froggy?
Like what?
Like Froggy goes a-courting?
Sure, we can go that way. Or I was thinking more like, 7 brides for 7 days. Yes. So, I'm going to start off with some of the endearments that were used in the medieval times, and some of the either physical things or animals that loves were often compared to. We have cinnamon. It was one of the more popular ones, other than sugar and honey. And in Chaucer's Miller Tale, he says, "My fair beard, my sweet cinnamon." So that's saying, "Aw, you're so spicy, you're adorable." And then turtle, not so much as the shelled reptile, but as in turtle doves, because they were seen as monogamous and very amorous to their pairs that they choose for life. And Lady M.W. Montague from 1717 is quoted in one of her poems to say, "Several couples of true turtles, cooing soft things to one another." Aww. So that's a couple of them, and we have a couple more slides. Flitter mouse. Anybody want to take a guess what that means? Yes. Flitter mouse was a bat. Medieval men like to compare their loves to bats. How romantic. And it is often, you're going to get stuck in your hair. It is often related to being modeled after the German Fledermaus, which is that little operetta that Germany is famous for. And then Ben Jonson's Alchemist from 1610, his quote is, "My fine Fledermaus, my bird o' the night." I mean, it sounds a little creepy, but, it has a nice ring to it. And then there's ding ding. Ooh, who doesn't want to be called a ding ding? It was very popular in the 16th and 17th centuries to compare your love to the clear ringing of a bell and that melody that you hear in church bells as they go through their noontime and midnight ringing sessions. And nowadays it's not really seen as a compliment because there's that ding dong that people get called sometimes, or the little hostess, or what is it, a hostess treat, the ding dong? Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd really want to be compared to a fast, cheap little piece of sweet. But ding ding was very popular back then. And my favorite, pig's knee. Yeah, pig's knee. Chaucer, that cad, he put in Miller Tale, "Her shoes were laced on her legs high." Ooh. She was a primerole, a pig's knee, for my lord to lay in his bed. Ooh, she was easy. Because she had boots up to here. So pig's knee is a derivative from pig's eye, which was used as a compliment, saying you're as bright and shining and beautiful as a pig's eye. Because I guess they thought pig's eyes were very jewel-like back in the medieval period. I'm not quite sure on that. I've never studied pig's eyes before, but it turned into pig's knee, just as an easier way to pronounce it. Now we're going to actually get into words, not just compliments. So if you want to go a-courting in medieval times, you might want to call your lover one of these. You might get some compliments right back. So the first word we have is charming. Whoops. I got a little carried away with the I got excited. It's charming me.
Easy.
It's charming me.
They're delicious.
Yes. The modern day form of charming means to be very sweet and kind and endearing. In medieval times, it was defined as the operation or using of charm, the working of spells, enchantment, incantation. So it was related to witchcraft. And in about 1300 in the Cursor Mundi, it says, I fooled witchcraft and fret and charming. So he's saying he was a fool to it. So if you want to be charming, you got to start looking up your spells and incantations. And then also in the prose treatise, there's, in this commandment is verboten, all witchcraft and shermony. Yeah, close enough. So it's a little bit different how we see charming these days. It's not quite as negative and evil as it was back in medieval period. Next is Chuck, one of my favorites. It comes from Shakespeare, that other cad in the medieval period. He coined this in Love's Labour's Lost. It comes from the Middle English word chuck, which kind of approximates the sound of a chicken clucking. If you've ever listened to chickens, they don't say cluck, 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 they say chuck, chuck, chuck. So it's a form of endearment in the fact that a mother hen is very loving and kind and caring for her chicks. So it's kind of that connection to it. And then Shakespeare moved it down into Love's Labour's Lost by saying, sweet chucks, beat not the bones of the buried. So a lot of times these words come through plays, poems, not so much manuscripts, it's mostly social documents that you find these compliments that become part of our culture. And then there is cute. Aww, cute. It comes from the Middle English, cute, cute, and cute. And it's a new wine being boiled down to a certain thickness and sweetness. So kind of like a syrup. So it's like syrupy, sweet, cute. And nowadays, cute is seen as kind of like, oh, that's precious, that's little. So the idea that cute, our modern cute, is more along the lines of the boiled down part where it's like smaller. That's our modern part of it. Whereas like back in the day, it was just basically a syrup that they created. And then in about 1460, J. Russell did the names of sweet wines. I would that ye the new ween cute. So basically, he's just naming off the names of the cute that they made from the wines. And then I also like this one, the sweet liquor named cute. So it's basically like a really boozy liquor syrup that they come up with. Heart. It is the male of a deer, especially of the red deer. A stag, specifically a male deer after its 5th year. That was the medieval definition of it. Nowadays, heart is very different. It can mean like a sentiment, or it can mean the actual organ itself. Back then, they didn't really think of it in that terms. So they're more along the lines of describing this great heart deer that they want to hunt. It was mostly saved for royalty, which I thought was a very interesting fact because it makes it seem like it's more important and more rare of a thing. So I think maybe there's a connection between the rarity of a heart deer to the heart that you love. That's an interesting connection I've been thinking of. And then there was a transition from the deer heart to the heart. And Shakespeare, again, is to help with that. He used a pun on our modern definition of heart with the homophones of heart and heart in Twelfth Night. In Act 1, Scene 1, lines 16 through 19, Curio, will you go hunt, my lord? Duke Orsino, what, Curio? Curio, the hart, meaning the deer. And then Duke Orsino is why, so I do, the noblest that I have. So he's saying he himself has a heart that is noble as a red deer. So Shakespeare is kind of playing on the duality of that word. Heartache and heartburn, very interesting. In the Old English, it was perece, and about 1600, it was a sense to express a sense of physical pain, and anguish of the heart and mind combined. And there was also in Old English, cernus, which is heart soreness. They used it as a poetic term to try to make a physical manifestation of the pain of being broken up with. And in Middle English, there's Hertbirna, which is lust, desire to burn at one's core for another in the mid-13th century. However, by the mid-15th century, it turned into anger and bitterness. Quite the transition. And I'm not quite sure why there was such a transition in the two of them. But further along down the line, the anger and bitterness transforms into our modern heartburn, where it's like the acid tearing apart at your esophagus and your stomach when you eat spicy foods. So it's kind of an interesting transition between heartburn from the old times to the modern times. We have honey. Aww, what a honey. There's the Old English and Middle English spellings of them. And honey, like cinnamon, was used as a sweet endearment for your love. Because you want to compare them to something sweet, right? You don't want to compare them to like cayenne pepper or black pepper. You want to compare them to cinnamon and sugar and honey. And one of the ways that they did was through comparing their love to a honey sop. Does everybody know what sop is?
You sop up like gravy with your bread.
Yep, it's kind of like the trencher and the sopping, where they use a big slab of bread and they put the food on top, and whatever soaks up is the sop. So what they used to do for children as a treat, they would soak bread in honey and give that as a honey sop treat to their children. So that became like an endearment because it's something sweet and small, and it's a sign of caring. And that is where we get our modern day honey bun and honey cake words from. It's from the honey sops. And then William Dunbar in 1513 writes, "My honey sops is my sweet posode." There's also the idea that there's a posset, which is a drink made from curdled milk and wine and honey and spices that was very popular in the Middle Ages. I don't know why. No, I don't know why. But that was also an endearment that people used in that time as well, because it involves honey. So that is also a very interesting thing, that you connect your love to food and curdled milk drink. Love. This is also very interesting, and there's many different spellings, as you can see, in Old English and Middle English. And it pretty much hasn't changed much in the definition from the medieval period to now. It's still a feelings of deep affection for the person that you're with, and great liking or strong emotional attachment. And then, as you can see, there's polychron, talking about women with how much they love their fairness and sternness. And then a little bit more on love. There is an interesting connection that I found in my research, that there might be a connection between love and leaf, through the word leov, which means deer. I haven't quite researched a lot of it. There's just new research coming out on this. I haven't looked too much into it, but it's a very interesting transition from love to deer through leaf, which also means love, leaf as well, in the modern sense, like the plant leaf. So that is a very interesting thing. If you ever want to know more, I will gladly give you the research I have. I haven't done too much on it, because there's not much yet there. And then we have queef. Ooh, yeah. Doesn't quite mean what it meant nowadays, because queef is, well, queef. If you don't know the definition, I can tell you later. I'm not going to shout it to the rooftops. But back in the Middle Ages, do you want me to, Dr. Swain? It's basically a lady fart that's not from the butt. That's the most tactful way to explain a queen. But in Middle English, the definition was a young woman, a prostitute. Also, in extended use, a woman or women regarded as means of sexual gratification, or the vulva and the vagina. And there's a pretty good quote about that there. I'm not going to go too much into it. If you want to read it, I will explain it to you. And finally, the last big hitter, quaint. There are 3 different versions of quaint. There's an adjective, adverb, and noun. We're going to start with the adjective, and it means cunning, ingenious, and elaborate. And then the Chronicles of Robert of Gloucester is saying how the Earl of Cornwall was very, very quaint in his abilities and his maneuvering around. In the adverb sense, it is in quaint manner or skillfully and cunningly. And Chaucer, again, that cad, and he's talking about how are his words cunning and skillful enough to seduce you. That's pretty much what he's saying there. And finally, the big hitter, the noun. The female genital, external genitals. Quaint turned into, I really don't want to say the word because it's the worst swear word in the English language, but it rhymes with punt. Let's put it that way. So this is the most modern version of it and the one that people most associate quaint with. And Chaucer, oh, he loved this version. There is from The Miller's Tale and The Wife of Bath's Tale and Miller's Tale again and another one. And then also cunning. That is a derogative of it. It used to mean a long-eared rabbit, but now it means more coarse slang of the female genitals and the vulva or vagina. And then that is everything. Any questions?
Yeah, I saw Hendy Nicholas's name there.
Yes.
What made you pick those particular words that you researched? Just like common vernacular and stuff?
I chose a lot of the words because there was a definitive change in how it was in the medieval period to the modern time, especially like quaint and cute. There's a lot of change in some of those words. And then I chose love because I knew there wasn't much of a change to show how some words don't change. There's a very strong line of what the definition is. And plus quaint is kind of funny. You want to end with that one. Yes?
What was the flitty mouse one?
Oh, flittermouse.
Flittered mouse. So is that before or after bats were bloodsuckers?
That was before they became an evil witchcraft associated thing. They were seen as these cute little mice with wings. And who doesn't want to be compared to a mouse? Because those are very cute little furry creatures. But then they decided, hey, that's a flying mouse. I'm going to call my love that. Which I would not appreciate, being called a bat. Any other questions at all?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Swain, do we have Dennis next?
Dennis is next.
Dennis is next.
Likely story. All right, next up is Mr. Dennis Staples. Dennis Staples is a BFA who actually admits to loving Game of Thrones and is our treasurer in the Medieval Club, as well as our poster wizard. So we saw the sexy Chaucer poster over in the Union. He and Augustus were instrumental in creating
He also
that.
did that turn down for what one?
Pardon?
He also did that turn down for what one?
Oh yeah, good job, Dennis. So he is pursuing a career in speculative fiction and will be reading at the next Reader's Spotlight, which is Wednesday at 2 o'clock upstairs. So if you want to hear his speculative fiction, come on up. Dennis, take it away.
So, I did my project on Chaucer and Valentine's Day through the
poem he wrote called The Common Fowls, or The Assembly of Birds. So, it is a dream vision poem. It's a genre in the Middle Ages about, someone would go through a dream and there's a lot of allegorical elements. Like if they saw certain themes or motifs, animals, it could be a symbolism for what was going on at the time. And we may or may not be getting some of that in this particular poem. The date of composition is unknown, but scholars date it around the early 1380s, around 1381. It's about 700 lines in rhyming verse, Middle English. Some say it is structured similar to and possibly inspired by Dante's Inferno. And it contains these allegorical elements, although critics are kind of divided on the themes inside of it, whether or not they're philosophical, allegorical for the political times going around, whether it's about the love of God versus the love of writing. But I've mostly chosen to focus on Valentine's Day, not on the season. So it begins with the narrator describing his love of reading and his search for a certain thing that he wants to learn. And he's searching for a book called Coelius of the Dream of Scipio, or the Dream of Scipio from the De Republica, a Latin political treatise written in the, I think around the 3rd century AD. So after that, after reading the book, he goes to sleep, full of brooding and anxious heaviness. He's woken by Africanus, one of the, I think one of the Roman emperors, or figures at least, in around this time that the De Republica was written. And he takes him to the park, and upon entering the park, there's a gate and an inscription on it that is what some people point out as similar to the inscription on the gates of hell. When they get there, the inscription is something like, those who enter here will feel love, and on the very other side of the gate, it's those who enter here will feel misery, or who leave here will feel misery for the rest of their lives. And on the way, they see nature personified as a woman, Cupid, and they enter the Temple of Venus, and in there they see many depictions of different doomed lovers throughout history. There's Paris and Helen of Troy, Troilus and Cressida, Cleopatra, Hercules, Tristan and Isolde. So definitely have the love theme going on. They leave the temple and they go back out into the park, and nature is sitting there, and she has all about her just every form of bird in existence sitting around, and she's holding a female eagle, or female eagle, and there's 3 male eagles, or tercel eagles, vying for the hand to be the female eagle's mate. They each make their case, one of them saying, basically, I'm the most royal and noble of them, I should marry her. Then one of them saying, I love her more, and one of them, he makes a certain point, I don't remember now. But because she can't choose each faction of the birds, the sparrows, the ducks, the goose, cuckoos, they're all given their own say to try and convince this young female eagle to choose. But nothing really gets done, and nature tells her to decide for herself, although nature suggests to her she should marry the most royal noble one, the first one. And the tercel eagle asks for the female eagle asks for another year to decide. And then they sing a song to celebrate the oncoming summer, and then the narrator wakes up and says, I'm going to keep reading. It's kind of a strange, abrupt ending. Now, it is labeled as one of the first references of Valentine's Day in the medieval thought, at least associated with love or some sort of romance. There's 4 references. You'll see them right here on the left, although this is in modern English translation. And the first 3 here, they all have some sort of connection to mating. For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every fowl comes there to his mate to take. And this third one here is part of the song that they sing. A few of Chaucer's contemporaries, one of them being John Gower, a personal friend of his, they all wrote different poems about this kind of a similar theme, birds mating on Valentine's Day specifically. And it's difficult to date which writer did it first, so can't really be said that Chaucer started the Valentine's tradition, but it was him and his circle of contemporaries that seem to have connected it with mating and courtship. That before this, it wasn't really associated with romance, but as kind of a spring tradition. And before that, the actual Saint Valentine, we don't know much about him, and what is reliable doesn't appear to be too much about love. The story about him being in prison and passing out these, or going to prison for passing out Valentines to soldiers, it appears that is just kind of a embellished story over the years. So this is what many scholars look to as the connection between Valentine's Day and love. Saint Anthony, apparently, and I think another one might be Saint Gregor. They were associated with days of love. So you could almost say that Saint Valentine, in history just kind of stole it from these other two and gave it to Valentine. Any questions?
That was great.
Yeah.
Next up is Devin Bierbrower.
And we're doing it together.
Oh, that's Sarah Barrett. Wow.
Although we wanted to warn everybody briefly, there are some fairly graphic images in this next presentation, so.
You've been warned.
Hide your eyes. And so Devin is graduating with a BFA and BA and works in residential life as one of those GA or RA type people. She loves all things Tolkien, is doing a thesis in Tolkien, and of course all things Swain. Sarah is a second-year GA who studies medieval stuff, has a degree in history from DSU before she came to our program. She enjoys time with her daughter Freya, the goddess, reads trashy romance novels, which she admits to in public. Shockingly enough.
Not even under torture.
No. She's doing a thesis on queens killing their drunken kings.
Yes.
And she is the club's vice president. Take it away.
Okay?
Fun with phallic symbols.
Yes.
All right, let's get this out of the way. 1, 2, 3.
Penis. We said it, so you can all laugh and get that out of the way. Ha ha
Thank
ha. Down to the serious study. And this is a serious study. There's a lot of information on this. So,
We might want to think, why is this even important to study phallic symbols? And first thing we thought of was the culture and the folklore studies. Phallic symbols pop up all over the place.
everywhere.
Everywhere. And it might be us just having really dirty minds, or maybe they just legitimately popped up everywhere. Especially in the use of symbols in art and literature, which we will definitely be showing you throughout the presentation. So
Yes.
don't worry.
Yay.
Also, we're going to go and try to give you guys a greater understanding of the prescribed gender roles in the medieval period. Specifically what the medieval thought was of masculinity and the feminine area.
Yes. Okay, sometimes the phallic symbols are very obvious
Oh.
in medieval marginalia. These are actual drawings in, a lot of them in, what are they called? Manuscripts? Well, not just manuscripts, but religious manuscripts. One of them is from the Romance in the Rose. That's these ones right here. And we only took a couple of these pictures. There are a lot of penis pictures in the Romance of the Rose, which is a courtly love poem, so allegorical, of course. And then this one in the middle is actually a
It's a brooch, often worn by religious figures high up on the totem pole.
Yes, it is from the 1300s.
And so instead of, President Obama wearing the flag, he'd be wearing a metal penis.
Yes.
What's it supposed to signify?
Fertility, power,
Power.
Allah.
basically. Yeah.
Wizards.
This one is another penis tree. This is actually one of the only surviving murals of witchcraft, and they just found it in 2000. We were discussing why penises on trees, of all the things you can have them portrayed on. Well, because trees represent
Fertility.
Allah.
and power. Yep, life-giving. It's where you get food and shade and fuel for your fire and fuel for your house and all kinds of things. So that is one of the reasons of that. And then, of course, the flying penis monster.
Those aren't just stumpy legs.
No. Nope. And that is in a...
It's in a manuscript.
It's in a
That's
manuscript.
a man writing it, not a woman.
Oh.
Yes, a man.
They
not a
just
woman.
did not know how to draw pectorals.
Yes.
And it's very smiley penis.
Yes, it's very happy.
It's having a great time.
We did read that some people do this to fill up space, blank space, but I don't buy that because you could fill up blank space with a lot of things that are not flying penis monsters. So yeah, but that's the obvious ones, and now we're going to go into the less obvious.
I'm going to read you guys a couple of riddles, but first, I'm going to tell you that these riddles are really, like this book right here is probably filled with all of the Anglo-Saxon literature that exists today. Like there's way more than that, but there's so much that has been destroyed,
Yes.
lost.
There's 4 big manuscripts that survive, and the rest of it is pretty much destroyed or fragmented, seriously fragmented. So these poems are important and some of the only Anglo-Saxon literature that we have left to study.
So I'm going to read these to you. I'm not going to tell you what they mean, but I want you to focus on the fact that in medieval literature, they really liked hinge words, meaning that they could swing either way. They could mean this, or they could mean this. So keep an ear out for that.
And if you know the answer, don't give it
Yeah,
away.
if you've heard this
For those of you who
before.
have heard these riddles.
Yeah.
Try to guess what the riddles are.
Okay, so this first one. I am a wondrous creature, to women a thing of joyful expectancy, to close line companions serviceable. I harm no city dweller excepting my slayer alone. My stem is erect and tall. I stand up in bed, and whiskery somewhere down below. Sometimes a countryman's quite comely daughter will venture, bumptious girl, to get a grip on me. She assaults my red self and seizes my head and clenches me in a cramped place. She will soon feel the effect of her encounter with me, this curly, locked woman who squeezes me. Her eye will be wet.
What is it?
Any guesses?
This is a riddle that they wrote.
Throw something out there. What do you think it is? Nick?
A penis?
Yes and no.
Come on.
Any other?
It's a hinge word.
It's
It's a hidden dirty riddle, basically.
Yes.
Any other
Well, that's
guesses?
okay.
It is
An onion.
ha.
Why? Because let's think here. My stem is erect and tall. I stand up in bed at a whiskery somewhere down below.
Farmer's
The
daughter.
roots. The farmer's daughter coming to seize me.
Making the eyes water, right? So yes, an onion. Of course, an onion.
Everybody knows
Go
that.
on.
This next one, I have 2 left. This next one is riddle 44. Keep an ear out for those hinge words. A curiosity hangs by the thigh of a man, under its master's cloak. It is pierced through in the front, it is stiff and hard, and it has a good standing place. When the man pulls up his own robe above his knee, he means to poke with the head of his hanging thing that familiar hole of matching length, which he has often filled before.
What is it?
Is it a key? Katie, good job!
It is a key.
Ding, 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 ding.
And also a penis. So,
Yes. So it's filling the familiar hole. It's long and stiff. It hangs beneath the men's thigh because they would often carry their keys right in this area.
Nice visual.
This area. All right. Last one. I have heard of a something or other growing in its nook, swelling and rising, pushing up its covering. Upon that boneless thing, a cocky-minded young woman took a grip with her hands. With her apron, a lord's daughter covered the tumescent thing.
What is it? Besides a penis.
No, I don't know this one.
Oh.
What do you think it is?
Is it a mushroom?
Nope.
Nope. It's
Good
dough.
guess, though. Dough, like
Dough.
the rising of dough covering the apron.
Right.
Also has yeast.
Yeast has yeast in it, yes. So, we just thought we'd share with you, they're hiding phallic symbols within riddles, right? And then, when someone says, that's really dirty, they can be like, actually it's not, it's just a key in your burger.
You're just
So, anyways,
next
Anglo-Saxon literature.
on to one of my favorite topics. Unicorns!
Eat your heart out of this print. So, these are some unicorns. These are tapestries of unicorns. And the phallic symbol within the unicorn is, obviously, the horn. Yeah, the unicorn's penis. The unicorn's penis, yes. Unicorns are almost always men, male unicorns. And
I'll get into the legend a little bit.
Yep. So the legend is
The only way to lure a unicorn in to be able to kill it and use its horn for purification processes is to bait it with a fair virgin. And the unicorn, with its horn erect in the air, prances into the gale with the virgin. And then the hunters attack.
yes, and they would put virgins out to try to catch unicorns. Of course, unicorn horns that they found were usually narwhal horns in reality, but they would use them to try to get rid of poison, to bless things, or just a good luck charm. Of course, I have a magic unicorn horn. I'm awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for fertility spells and charms and things like that.
Yeah.
So the horn itself is considered very magical and phallic because it is stiff, erect thing on the top of someone's head. When the unicorn is being surrounded and captured, what does this mean for the phallic symbol? Because it is no longer the erect, tall phallic symbol. So when they're being captured, what happens?
This is a huge area of study, and I read several essays on the piece, and we're going to first talk about how the unicorn is not yet captured. Its horn is in the air, meaning its erect penis, meaning it is powerful, it is a masculine symbol. However, as you'll see in the next slide, I'll show you the tapestry. When the unicorn's horn is down, it's in submission, and or it's flaccid. And this means that it's not masculine anymore, it's lost its masculinity, and thus it can be captured, meaning it's powerless, meaning men with flaccid penises are not men.
Mm-hmm. One of the words, or a lot of the terms used to describe this are passive, when it's in submission, and active is some of the more scholarly terms that are used to describe.
Yes, and that can also be related to the male and female ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Females are seen as passive in medieval literature, and males are seen as active. And I just want to read you a quote real quick by Leonard Teifer. He says, "Sexual fertility, the ability to feel the conjugal duty, sexual power, potency, is everywhere a requirement of the male role, and thus impotence is everywhere a matter of concern. Although the term has been used for centuries to refer specifically to partial or complete loss of erectile ability, the first definition never mentions sex, but refers to a general loss of vigor, strength, or power." Once again, if a man can't achieve a full erection, he's hardly a man.
In the medieval
thing.
Yes. We wanted you guys to note that some people might think, well, they weren't really that serious about this, but these are tapestries, okay? And in order for you to understand how much time they devoted to making this art, I need you to understand that this is a lifetime of work. It would take 30 skilled weavers 18 to 16 months to make one of these. 30 women over a year to make just one tapestry.
These tapestries are 12 by 13 feet on average.
Yeah, the 30 weavers 8 to 16 months. That's to make 6 5-by-8 yard tapestries is how long it would take them. So, I mean, imagine how long it would take to make this. And all of these tapestries deal with the capturing of a unicorn. They were well aware of what the phallic symbol was in the medieval period. They had a different view of symbols than we have today. They used them differently. They had almost more clear understanding of symbols than we do. So they knew what they were doing when they made these. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, this is the one I referred to during last slide. It is where the hunters are about to capture the unicorn. Notice how the horn is facing down, meaning the unicorn is in a powerless position. But the part of this tapestry you also want to notice is the horn is in the stream. The whole story of this tapestry is how the stream is poisoned and the unicorn is using its horn to purify the water. And this is why the hunters want the horn to begin with, is because it's part of that purification process. The unicorn horn is down. This is a very obvious symbol.
We also did read a little bit of research about fountains being phallic symbols. Also, a man-made phallic symbol, but we didn't get too far into that.
There's also speculation that men in the medieval period viewed themselves as artificially made and women as naturally born. So this could also reference to the fountain being artificially made. It also will come up later when we're talking about the sword in the tree, and the sword in the stone, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so the next one is a little bit about rabbits. Rabbits are yonic symbols, which are the opposite of a phallic symbol. Another subset of marginalia in general is that which depicts the monde renverse, the upside down world where the usual roles are turned on their heads and the lines between humans and animals are blurred. In this picture we have a rabbit showing its posterior to a man with a sword. Now, the rabbit represents the woman, and a sword obviously is a phallic symbol. And if you look at the positions of that, it's fairly obvious where that phallic symbol is going to go. The other one is, this is a rabbit down here, and it is tied up and being whipped by a man. So, yet another phallic symbol.
Much like in our previous presentation about conies and the rabbits.
Yes, rabbits.
Connections.
That's where we get our modern word for rhymes with punt. Okay. This is a fox and a cock. A rabbit often stands for the vulva or coney in English, cunny. Casey kind of covered that for us. Some other animals from the late medieval period that are phallic, according to Jones, the article where I got most of this information, it was from the Folklore, which is a scholarly article magazine. This would be the mussel, which surprised me, like not like a mussel, like I'm so muscular and manly, but like the mussels that you eat from the sea. The ass, the fox tail, not the fox itself, but specifically the bushy tail. And cock horns, they would draw pictures of roosters with actual horns on them, I guess. Just to name a few of the more phallic animals. The rooster, very phallic. This is a picture of a knight pantsless astride a cock. Malcolm Jones states in his article for the journal Folklore, the cock symbolizes lust in medieval marginalia, which is the drawings and sides. And it's undoubtedly an observation of the strutting lord of the farmyard harem that led to this. You know, roosters are in charge of the whole of the women in their little harem. And often one of the bizarre lead badges of sexual content, which were emerging in increasing numbers. They're finding a lot of this. So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. And swords. Swords are probably one of the most common phallic symbols. It's easy to understand why.
Men usually carried them, and they're really oblong in the shape of beasts.
And they also mean power and domination and things that are sometimes in the medieval period associated with men.
We're going to do a quick reading from the Toyne, specifically where there is a sword stolen and this man feels he has lost his masculinity. Sword stolen, he doesn't have a sword. What does that mean? Oh, his penis is not useful. And it was stolen by a charioteer because he was sleeping with another man's wife, and the charioteer saw them and stole this man's sword. And now, this man is asking for, his name is Fergus, he's asking for not to battle because he doesn't have his sword. So he is rendered useless. And Cuchulainn, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, he has these crazy warp spasms. Cuchulainn is making fun of him because of this. And he says, this is Cuchulainn's page. He says, in the first chariot there is a great dark man. His hair is dark and full. He wears a red embroidered hooded tunic. He carries a curved shield with a scalloped edge of light gold and a stabbing spear bound around from its neck to its foot. There is a sword as big as a boat's rudder at his thigh. Cuchulainn said, a big empty rudder. That is my friend Fergus, and it isn't a sword but a stick he has in his scabbard. I have heard that Alil caught him off guard when he slept with Med and stole his sword and gave it to his charioteer to keep. A wooden sword was put in the scabbard instead.
So the taking of the sword from somebody could literally, in their view, mean the taking of the masculinity, of the manhood, of the essence of being a man in that prescribed gender role in medieval culture. So that's the Torian, an ancient Irish epic. Some other swords that you might recognize, especially even in our modern culture, would be the sword and the stone. A phallic symbol sticking down, where whichever man is man enough or powerful enough to draw it out and hold it aloft in the erect, active position will become king. So the sword and the stone, it's a phallic symbol. Pulling it out, holding it aloft. In the Volsea saga, there is a similar passage where Odin takes a sword and sticks it into the tree barnstalk. As mentioned before, trees are usually symbols of fertility, a lot of times of women. And whoever can pull the sword from the tree gets to keep the sword. And all these men try and they can't do it. So.
And he said, he brandished the sword and thrust it into the trunk so that it sank up to the hilt. Words of welcome failed everyone. Then the man began to speak. He who draws this sword out of the trunk shall receive it from me as a gift, and he himself shall prove that he has never carried a better sword than this one. And so on and so forth, all the men try to get it. But then Sigurd, correct?
Yep.
Sigmund.
Sigmund, sorry.
Now Sigmund, the son of King Volsung, came forward. He grasped the sword and drew it from the trunk. It was as if the sword lay loose for him. The weapon seemed so good to everyone that no one recalled ever seeing so fine a sword.
So that's basically that one. Fairly self-explanatory. There's a lot of symbolism in that too. This picture is a wood cutting, also from Volsung Saga, the same story, of the reforging of the sword, which you might recognize from Lord of the Rings. Tolkien kind of took this story and repurposed it, where when the sword or the masculinity is broken, they cannot fight. But when they reforge a whole sword and they have the phallic symbol complete again, then they can use it to fight and win their war. That is what happens there. And then in this story is particularly interesting. It is from Hrothgraki, the saga of Hrothgraki. And basically what happened is a guy gets turned into a bear. He turns into a man at night, gets a woman pregnant. His stepmom kills him. And he's like, whatever you do, don't eat me. But his stepmom tricks his lover, pregnant lover, into eating him. And her children become deformed as a result. One of them has the feet of a deer, one has antlers, and one is a normal human being. Now, before he dies, he puts 3 things into the walls of a cave. He sticks a sword into the wall of the cave, an axe, and a bow and arrow. And all 3, I don't know if we need to read this one because we're running low on time, but all 3 brothers try to come in and take the sword. The oldest fails because he is not a full man. He is half man, half human. The second oldest comes, tries to take the sword, fails. They both get other things that are not a sword, the bow and arrow and the axe, which are manly but not a phallic symbol. And then the one who is the Bothvar, I think his name is, who is the full human, does manage to draw the phallic symbol out of the wall and be the man and have the phallic symbol. So. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Then just one more thing, Beowulf and the battle with both Grendel and Grendel's mom. Beowulf, he's this great hero, and he battles the monster Grendel. However, what makes that battle special is he battles Grendel completely naked. Now, people would say that he doesn't have a sword in that instance, but if anybody knows anything about how the male body is set up, he had a sword. And although he may not have directly used it, he still had a sword when he battled Grendel. Thus, when we go over to when he battles Grendel's mom, the sword he then receives after fighting Grendel doesn't work. And he needs a more powerful giant sword, actually forged by giants, to defeat Grendel's mother. And it isn't until he gets this special sword, this special phallic symbol, can he slay Grendel's mom.
Another interesting thing about that scene in Beowulf is that Grendel's mom actually straddles Beowulf when they're fighting and tries to stab him with a dirk, a small stabbing sting, basically. Yeah, little dagger. But the fact that she is on top and reversed phallic symbols, and that Beowulf actually steals this giant sword from her. It's her sword that's hanging in her hall, but she's not using it. Now, if you had a magic sword like that, why would you not use it?
I don't know.
Because you're not a man, and it's a phallic symbol. Therefore, you can't. Although she attempts to be man-ish, right, by climbing on top, a manly position in the medieval period. And, yeah, so there's a lot of interesting phallic stuff going on, especially in the fight scene between Grendel and Grendel's mom. And some more virgins killing unicorns for their horns. So,
Phallic symbols are fun, guys.
really fun.
Any questions?
We have a lot of sources if you want them.
When you're talking about Grendel's mother with this little stiletto dirk, what does that equate to for a phallic symbol?
Tiny penis.
Besides the obvious.
I don't know that we researched that, if there is a feminine.
Because women often carry dirks.
Yeah.
At that time.
I don't know if they have a feminine, if they have like a feminine weapon. Do you know?
If there would be, this is purely speculation, but
Yeah.
if I had to equate it to something that was on the feminine aspect, it would probably be the feminine form of the penis. It would be the clitoris in that instance, where it's smaller, it's more compact, and the women typically use it.
We didn't find anything on that. I don't think it's an area that's been greatly researched. They mainly focus on the phallic symbols themselves. But we did find a lot of marginalia pictures where people are bending over like the rabbit was and showing their rear end, and people are shooting arrows into their butt.
Oh my.
That's actually a really common picture. We didn't think we would have time to go there with that, but I mean, if you look it up, there's a lot of very interesting phallic marginalia. So,
Any other questions? Thanks, guys.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I did too.
Back in cleanup for us, Madam President, Megan Brault, double major BA, BFA, enjoys her cats and dogs with her husband who cooks her bluefish.
Cute.
It's a lie. He made a really bad joke where he was like, I'm cooking lutefisk and liver. It was like two things that I'm just gonna starve tonight. And I came home, he actually cooked a roast, so good on him. Because I was just ready to never eat again. So as we've heard, there's a lot of sex and penis stuff going on. So I decided to do a presentation on medieval contraception and pregnancy testing because it's fascinating and extremely weird. I'm very glad I'm in 2015. So there were different types of contraception, kind of like how we have today, where, I mean, you have preventative, non-preventative, so like your Plan B pill, would be non-preventative. Preventative would be birth control pills, condoms, that kind of thing. Or having, like, there's this third category, like why being a bell, and sometimes having the baby but not telling anybody. So, I mean, you know, pictures or it didn't happen. You can't prove I was pregnant. Gosh, guys. So, preventative contraception. I'll get to that. Oral contraception, which included a just huge variety of different things that they would eat, different herbs and stuff like that from all over. Basically anything could be used and would be marketed as an oral contraception. They would also not just use it as oral contraception, but also they would put it up their butt.
Without the help of a sword.
Or arrows.
Or arrows.
Casanova actually came up with one, or it's said that Casanova did. Lemon peels would be used as a cap over the cervix. Condoms made of various animal parts, which we can see in a tale of King Minos, who used a goat bladder. A ball of crocodile dung and honey mixed up and then inserted into the vagina. They used multiple different types of goop to do this, and multiple other things that they would, mostly nasty. Like, it wasn't just herbs that they would do this with, it was usually the gross stuff. Not sure why. They would also use things that they thought would be spermicides, such as salt water, vinegar, and lemon juice. Yes, again, happy to be in 2015. The latter half of the 20th century, though, teenagers were using Coca-Cola. They were shaking it up and using that to flush out sperm. So, a lot of this seemed to be very, very painful for the woman. I'm not exactly sure why anybody would use these methods. They would also try to push out the sperm by curling up and then sneezing, and if that didn't work, do butt kicks, and if that didn't work, jump up and down. All of this was, this came from the 1st century Greek physician, Soranus.
Sorriness.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, it didn't happen. I really wanted to hit on this particular herb or what have you, because it worked so well. And we know this because we've tested other types of it. Silphium, it was thought to be related to the giant fennel and was about the only thing that would grow reliably in Libya. Wealthy Greeks and Romans would spend just ridiculous amounts of money to get this. And entire cities were actually supported strictly by the sales of this. They used it so much that it went extinct in the 4th century. But it was also used for like cough medicine and flavoring of foods. Asafoetida, which we still use today, the root sap is used to make Worcestershire sauce, which is delicious. If anybody knows about it.
And not a contraceptive.
No. It's thought to be the closest living relative. Tests of this and other things within the same fennel family have actually been used in rats and stopped implantation of fertilized ova 40 to 50% of the time, which is actually pretty impressive. And one type of fennel, although it wasn't listed which type, prevented pregnancy in rats 100% of the time if received within 3 days of the unprotected sex. Really amazing. And it's not hard to see why the original went extinct, because everybody would have wanted this. So, if all that fails, and this is their non-preventative, because they didn't have Plan Bs, and I'm not condoning this, just giving you the information. Abortion, most abortion techniques were just using contraception after the fact. Very, very few times would this actually work. And they would even go a step further and actually kill their children after having it as a form of abortion. It still falls into that same line of things. Concealment, and there's a lot of very funny stories about the concealment. Seems to be one of the best forms of birth control during the times, usually done because women in the tales that we have had a moral issue with having an abortion. And they would generally receive help from another woman, such as a midwife, to get through the birthing process, and then they would secret the baby away to the father, or whoever else in the family could raise it. This was a tale that I found about a monk and an abbess having an affair. And the abbess is like, I don't know, this doesn't sound like a good idea. What if I get pregnant? No, it's okay. I will give you this necklace. I've written a magical formula on it in this little piece of paper. It's kind of locket. It's a locket. Just wear it. It's all going to be okay. She gets pregnant. Surprise. And the monk runs very far and very fast. And so she ends up opening the locket to see what it is. And basically what it says is, don't have sex and then you won't get pregnant. Thanks. So, that's that story. And many times to help with the concealment, they would wrap a bunch of things around the stomach of the woman and then slowly take it away each day. So it's like, I just gained a bunch of weight and then I lost it all. Medieval views on contraception and abortion, things like that. There weren't very many people who were against contraception. Mostly the church, but even they, it was kind of like, don't do this, but if you can't have a kid, then do this. So, they still dealt with the same kind of things that we do today with that. And some that are against it are for it if there's a good reason. Poverty, famine, take care of the kids. So the medieval view on non-preventative contraception, however, is a little bit more complex. Many were very against abortion, and there was a fair amount of concern as to when life technically began. 40 days is when the soul comes into the fetus, or they did not believe it was right at conception, though. But a lot of that is really fuzzy. Others had no problem with abortion, but they did have a problem with infanticide. Still, others had no issue with that, which I found extremely surprising. Again, as long as there's a good reason. Not sure what that really is after you have your child, but that's my personal view. There is evidence of a mother who was found drowning her child, and they brought forth 24 jurors to decide one way or another if she was guilty or not. And they decided that actually she was not guilty because her child is hers to do as she sees fit, like an object. And neither of these were seen as illegal. Sometimes infanticide was, but not abortion. Abortion so much because you couldn't prove it without a body. So the church was usually handed these matters to deal with versus the law because it was more of a moral issue. Now to the funnier stuff, pregnancy testing. Pregnancy tests today are done by peeing on a stick, and hormone levels are tested within, and that's how we find out if somebody is pregnant. And you can test up to 5 to 6 days before this period. It's really great. But there was still a lot of focus on pee. And there were things called piss profits. You would bring your pee, you would do this test there, and these people would just study your pee. In ancient Egypt, there was the wheat and barley test. You would pee in a bag of wheat and barley seeds for 3 to 4 days, sometimes more. If the wheat grows, you're having a girl. If the barley grows, you're having a boy. And if nothing grows, you're not pregnant. This is actually, it's been tested, it's 70% accurate. Way to go, Egyptians. So another way, and this is also in ancient Egypt, a woman would drink the milk of a woman who had just born a son, and if the lady who drinks it pukes, she's pregnant. Yep. In more of the Germanic area, urine was mixed with sulfur and worms came about. Then she was pregnant. Mixing it with wine to see if there was a change. And this was actually moderately successful because alcohol reacts with certain proteins in special ways. And then rabbit killing. And mostly, they did this with a lot of different types of rodents, pretty much whatever they could kind of nab up. The urine of the woman was injected into the rabbit or other rodent-like animals, and after a few days of this, it was cut open to see if it had ovulated or had any weird changes to it, like that. So, that's it. There was also some other contraceptive practices, such as taking the testicles of a weasel and tying it to the thigh of the woman before sex, or the foot of a weasel, or a black cat.
No chastity belts though.
No. Oh, yes, another pregnancy test. They would stick an onion or a clove of garlic or something like that into the vagina of the woman and leave it overnight. And if in the morning her breath smelled of onion, she was not pregnant because the onion obviously could pass all the way up into her mouth. You could also pee out sperm, apparently. There's a lot of interesting anatomy issues that they have. But, any questions?
With all of these foreign objects going in there, infection must have been rampant. What did you find with that?
I actually didn't find anything. There was no talk about infection, and I'm terrified. Terrified. This is not a how-to guide.
I think they probably wouldn't have, women, they didn't care, yeah. Women were not seen as important, although women's death rates are much, much higher than men's.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this is
I wouldn't be surprised if putting feces in your vagina would cause you to die. But, so they wouldn't have kept records on anything about that, or maybe even known that that's what caused them to be sick.
They
Because
probably
they
just
just
said
didn't
their
have
humors
records.
were out of whack because they were being promiscuous.
Yeah, they could have been that, you know.
They died because the devil was inside them.
Yeah, that very well could be. I know it was infanticide, especially in like the northern Germanic areas. They did have a lot of infanticide if your child was born deformed.
Yes.
And the church actually condoned that and gave special ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So infanticide was really, really common.
Yeah.
Now, since you've included rabbits as well in your presentation, did you come across anything specific for rabbits? Why rabbits? Would there be like a connection like through my presentation and through the ballot symbol presentation?
I would assume just because it's a yonic symbol, it would have been.
Yeah.
I think
is that
it's
a safe
also-
assumption to make?
I think it would be, but I also think it's just because, rabbits breed so quickly
Yes.
that, they're everywhere. So, I mean, just grab this thing running around and,
Or that it breeds so quickly, it must therefore be fertile, and
yes, we can use this to
we can
test.
use this to test ourselves.
This practice of dosing rabbits with urine actually held up for quite a while, and they figured out a way to open up the rabbit, figure out what they needed to know, sew it back up, and then let it keep running around, and then they would use it later on after it went out of heat again. So they didn't always die, but they usually did.
Any other questions?
You talked about like the lemon peel with Casanova. Did you find anything else like with like onion skin or potato peels? Because those are ones that I've heard that like were prevalent even like more recently.
I didn't, but there was a lot of nothing definitive. I got most of this off medievalist.net. It's a great website. Check it out. But there was a lot of like internet chatter about different things that were used as like cervical caps. So I mean, very possibly. I mean, there's a lot of talk about different stuff up there. I'm like I said, very happy to be in 2015 as a woman. I'm glad we have different things to use. So.
That would value your lives as women a little bit more?
That too.
Just saying.
Any other questions though? Okay.
Thank you all for coming. As you can see, my work here is done. I believe we'll be having another event sometime.
We have a meeting,
Yes.
not next Monday, but the
2
Monday
Mondays
after.
from now.
Yep, we have Mondays at 10 a.m. And we also like us on Facebook. We will be posting things on there. But we have Mondays at 10 a.m. in the Viking Room, which is down in Lakeside. It's those little sectioned off rooms, cubicle things. We have a lot of fun. We talk about stuff like this. We decide our next CFPs, which is what this is, because it's called the papers.
Maypole.
Oh yes, we are also doing a May Day fair type thing where we're
Speaking
gonna
of
have
phallic
a maypole is a
What's
giant
it?
phallic symbol.
It's amazing to dance around.
Yep, we're gonna have little
virgins specifically.
Good luck.
I know a few.
Just a college.
Even in my pocket just in case I made a tag a unicorn.
But yeah.
They have a lot of jokes like this too, so it's not all super serious.
Oh, Kirsten Wolf.
Oh, Dr. Wolf.
Yes, Dr.
I also
Kirsten
have
Wolf.
another one, yes. In March sometime, we're going to have a friend of mine from Appalachian State discuss transgender from a low-key perspective. It's a very fascinating paper I've heard before. Definitely come check out that. That's going to be in conjunction with the Phoenix Club. And then Kristen Wolf, sorry, for her first name, is going to be talking about severed breast and color theory and a variety of other things. Semiotics.
Yep.
Variety of other things when she comes in April.
April
9th,
10th, and 11th. No, 9th and 10th. There'll be 3 lectures she's giving. And the one on severed breast is really, it's about gender mutilation of saints.
And
And
test it to see if it was a saint or a heretic.
yeah,
A lot of them were the same tests.
yeah,
Cool crap.
very, very interesting.
Very
so
cool.
please join us for that and keep, looking for posters and stuff.
Like us on Facebook.
Which one of those is going to be honors lecture?
The honors lecture is Kirsten Wolf and the severed breast, I believe.
That's on the list for honors.
Hmm?
Also, if you're in
She
the
is-
Monster
she
and
is
the
a
Shakespeare
publisher.
class and you haven't signed this piece of paper, it'll be up here.
Like a murder mystery.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Jesse.
Valentine's Day.